Hey guys, um, this is a little bit more of a different video. It's still gonna be like part of my podcasting and stuff. But in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about like leaving your hometown, right? And like moving away and being away from, family and everything like that. Um, I know that like it's really hard making that decision when you are going away from your family, no, and going away from like everything basically, right? It's a pretty scary ordeal. And then on top of that is like leaving your family, leaving the people who you've lived with for your whole life, you know? And it's very challenging, and I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit today, and also throw a little bit of ADHD stuff in there as well, so that it correlates to the podcast. My parents used to live in Connecticut, and now they live in North Carolina, but they didn't really particularly move because they wanted to. They kind of moved because they had to. My dad at the time was laid off, and so he needed to find a job, and so then he found a job in North Carolina, and that's why we ended up moving. So it wasn't really off of a whim, like, hey, I just want to go here. It was just I need to do this for work. I need to do this to make a living for my family. And that's kind of how we ended up in North Carolina. And so I was like 5 years old, maybe at the time. I was in kindergarten. But I basically grew up in North Carolina, I grew up in the South. I grew up with the country twang. I grew up with, farmers. I grew up with, so many different kinds of people. And I'd like to say that, many of them I feel like are small-minded. Many of them lived there and haven't really moved anywhere. Many of them are true North Carolinians that I've met, like, at school or whatever. And so that was where I was raised, that was what I grew up living, right? The country fields, but they would build, like, neighborhoods and houses and things like that around me, but, like, nothing too city, like, nothing too major. Until I was probably like older. Then they started doing like, a little bit more of like a shopping mall and things like that. But I feel like, when you're growing up and that's kind of like all like, that you came from someplace, right? You have small parts of vivid memories of that place you used to live in, right? But your whole life has kind of moved on and changed from that. And, you're here now. And that kind of always stuck with me. I had one really good best friend when I was in Connecticut, and his name was Jack. I don't know if, he watches my videos or whatever, but he was like my best friend that I remember. And, I always thought about him. Again, like, it was small memories. Like, I would remember, like, I would think of random times, random parts of a memory, but, I just kind of remember how I felt, and I was like, man, like, maybe when I get older, I'll move back to Connecticut, maybe, because, I don't know, when you have a feeling, it, like, sticks with you, right? When you have all these kinds of feelings and emotions, it kind of just follows you, regardless of if you want to think about it or not. It's kind of like in your subconscious, I guess. But I only just thought about like moving back to Connecticut. It was never like anywhere else. It wasn't until like we started traveling like to Florida, or places like that on the East Coast, that I was like, oh, like, this is cool, but this is like just a vacation destination. Like, it's not, I could never see myself living here. This is just a vacation, right? And I don't know, like, as I got older, I just I just started to become very uncomfortable with where I was. And it was, partially because I was changing, myself, who I liked. I was changing mindsets, right? I was watching all these YouTube videos, and at the time I was watching like travelers and, people who were doing it and traveling and, seeing the world. And I was like, wow, like, I wish I can be on like a never ending, vacation, basically, right? And then I started thinking, I was like, you know what, like, this is like, I'm just here. I'm just in this same small town I've always been in. I've always done the same things, went to the same parks, went to the same mall, or a few malls, I should say. Done the go-karting, done all the things that you could do. Went to the mountains, seen that, the beaches, done that, Myrtle beaches and stuff like that. So it's just like I was kind of lost in a place of what next. I don't want to really repeat the same things. Like I can't do that. And I know so many people are comfortable with, where they're born and raised and grew up and have no intentions of leaving. Like my brother, he has no intentions of leaving North Carolina, and that's fine. That's partially a reason that it's hard to be away from family, is that like, your family wants to stay in one place, but you have other ambitions, ideas, and concepts that kind of drive you away from that. And so that kind of makes it hard, and it wasn't until I went to this summer camp in Maine that I realized that you can live anywhere you want as long as you're working and have a job that can provide housing. And there's so many places and things you can find that can allow you to do that. But and then from there it clicked. I just was so upset with where I was living, because I had exes, and it was the same house. My parents were divorced at the time, and it was just kind of like all caving in on me. And I was like, man, I gotta get out. I gotta get out of North Carolina. I gotta push myself out here. I gotta do something. And by the graces of God, or whoever you believe in, I ended up doing that, and it ended up happening in a job interview. And I ended up going to Maine for 2 months away, and I felt like I could actually breathe again. And knowing that I needed to get out of North Carolina and move out and move away, it was a scary feeling, because I'm like, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is what I'm supposed to feel like. I'm not supposed to be miserable all the time, So it just made it hard, because I knew that, wherever I went, that it wasn't going to be North Carolina. It wasn't going to be home. Like, my brother wasn't going to be there. My parents weren't going to be down the street. Like, it was going to be a new thing, a new challenge. And I think that's what I liked about it. And that's the thing about ADHD and people with ADHD, is that, like, their dopamine always subsides. It always levels out, always plateaus. And then we look for the next challenge, right? We look for that next dopamine hit, right? It's always the next thing. And so we become frustrated until that new challenge is presented to us. And I feel like that's what happened with me, is that, I was so frustrated with where I was. Mentally, physically, I was just drowning in my own, like, environment. And, so I got out. I moved away. I packed up my stuff after Maine, and, I followed a girl to California, and I lived a different life. I lived a life without my parents. I lived a life without seeing my brother every day, checking in on me, and doing all that stuff. I lived a life where, I was free from all of that. I lived and I worked, in a job that I never would have thought I would worked, right? I was a science teacher, and I don't have any experience teaching, nonetheless, science. But, that's what I did. That's what I had to do to get out. And, it was scary. I was in a whole new time zone. I was 3 hours difference from in North Carolina. I was living out in California, and that fear of just like, okay, like when I go back, like things are just gonna be different because I'm gonna have a new mindset because of like my new environment is challenging me, challenging my ideas, challenging where I came from, right? What I believe. And when I go back to North Carolina, everything's gonna be the same. People are gonna still have their mindsets, and I'm gonna be so different. And how is that gonna look? And it's scary when that question even comes up, right? And it's just, a whole new ball game when you move out of your small town, And, when you go back and you kind of see the same people that you saw in high school, and you're like, what happened? Like, I thought you were, going out. I thought you went to another college. I thought, and then maybe just people like it, maybe just people like the predictable life, maybe, that's just what's in it for them. Maybe that's what my brother likes, that predictable life, that, white picket fence house and, a job that's stable and reliable, and, and somehow that's just not for me. That's just not how I'm wired. And I'm, I don't really know what I'm going to be doing. I have freelancing jobs, contractual jobs, right? Like every few months I'll get something, and then the next months I won't have any job. And, I really just want to travel everywhere, anywhere. It seems to make my brain go quiet. It seems to make all the thoughts just kind of dissipate. It, helps challenge me. It's like a thing that I need, right, in order for my brain to succeed or feel like it succeeded at something. And it's a way that I can create some of the things that I want to create, right, from YouTube or whatever. And, I don't know, I finally feel like, from having this kind of lifestyle, right, this run and gun, off the foot lifestyle. I mean, I have an apartment now, so I guess that's really not run and gun anymore. But that year that I was in, that was crazy. I loved it. And I think that, like, I want more of it, And it's like, I'm 23 now, and, everyone's having kids, or their kids are at least, like, 1 year old already. Everyone's getting married. Everyone is, doing the things that you're supposed to be doing in your 20s. And I'm just kind of out here having fun, seeing the world, I guess, periodically. Making YouTube videos on the internet. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And it seems like everybody else has it kind of already figured out, like it's already set in stone, like implemented from when they were like a kid. Like this is what you're supposed to do. But to me, that's just boring because it's already planned out for me. Like, I don't want to do something that's already planned. Like, I want to go and make my own plan. And I don't know, living in a small town kind of happened in the same way where, like, there was a plan, right? I had to go over to my mom's house for dinner, and, I'd come back and stay at my dad's house, and I'd wake up in the morning and go to work. And then in the afternoon, I would come home, and, I would have this kind of like schedule, this routine, this Ferris wheel kind of life. And I absolutely, like, just couldn't handle it. And at the end, I honestly thought I was going to be admitted into a mental hospital because of it. I mean, it was just all dark and bad. So, I guess, I don't know, to anyone who is kind of getting tired of your hometown, the town that you kind of grew up in and learned from, and have all those morals and mentalities, and you have these thoughts of, like, just going and getting out, like, go and do it. Like, honestly, I just go do it. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to figure out it financially, and it's going to be stressful, and it's going to be, difficult. But I think in the end, the things that you'll end up learning is something that is just, like, irreplaceable. At least for me it was. But, I mean, I would just dream of getting out and mostly going to New York. But, then I started living on the road, basically, right? Moving to Maine, to California, to doing a road trip to Pennsylvania. It kind of got rid of that New York dream for me. It kind of opened up this new lens for me of being on the road and traveling and learning all these new things and seeing all these sights. And you see it so much in your lifetime in movies and YouTube videos, and now that you finally get to experience it, it's just something quite different, and you can't get that in your hometown. And if you stay there for the rest of your life, you just can't get that. This isn't really a mindset for everyone, This is just like a thing that some people go through. Maybe it's because I have ADHD that I'm going through it. Maybe it's because I get bored too quickly. Maybe it's because I need more of a challenge. I don't know. You still feel the guilt when you leave. You still feel the guilt even almost after a year of doing it, right? You're still like, well, my family's in another state and I'm in another, and, you have to find time to still stay in contact, And it's just like, I probably will never step foot in that state living-wise again. Like, I won't live there because I can't do it as seen, And who knows, maybe I'll get tired of this place and I'll have to find something else to fuel that boredom, that challenging side. Maybe I'll rent an RV or something. I don't know. There's just so many possibilities that you can do in life, and I feel like mine is very off the worn path. My path is kind of just sporadic and everywhere, I guess. That's how it feels, at least. I guess that's how it feels in most people's lives, but I feel like mine more than most because I don't really know where I'm going to be in the next month. And I guess that's the exciting part, right? That keeps me entertained, that keeps my brain going and in the game. My parents still call, and, I still feel somewhat guilty for leaving, that I couldn't handle it there, that I'm not closer to them, because I know that, all of my life they've just kind of been around me, and now that I'm not around them, like, how does it impact them? You know what I mean? Like, I think about that stuff, I think about how they feel, and I think about, those kinds of things, and I still feel guilty. Like, I still feel those kinds of feelings when you leave. And sometimes, I even get a bit of nostalgia, right? So I miss the country, right? I miss the, hot summer days where, you're looking at a field and you can kind of walk kind of into it and be like, it's really like hot and stuffy, and then you come out and it's like breezy, right? Sometimes, I miss the trees and the blue skies and the lemonade for lunch, or, I miss the smells of home. Sorry, there's guys outside my apartment right now fixing the windows. But there's things that, like, get me, and there's things that I miss, and, I don't want to miss them, right? Nobody wants to feel nostalgia, because that bitch can be harmful, nostalgia, for sure. Especially if you act on certain things when you get nostalgia. But, there's points where I'm like, man, maybe I should just take a trip back down. Maybe I should just take another trip. Maybe I should, go see my family and stuff like that. But it's just also like, I gotta live my life. I gotta live, all this new stuff. Like, I can't, I can think about them a little bit, but I can't overthink about it, That's also another issue I have, is like overthinking. I feel like everybody overthinks though these days, so I guess I'm not alone in that. But I feel like you know, just missing the thing that I grew up in. It's hard in that manner too, right? But I think that the pros outweigh the cons in this situation. I think that I'm thriving out of the state I was born and grew up in, out of the town, you know. I think that I'm doing a lot better, and that's kind of what I have to focus on when I feel those things of nostalgia, is that, like, I have to know in my heart that I made the right decision, that I did what was best for myself at the time, and, you know, still the best decision for me now. But yeah, I think that being in a small town and kind of feeling those things is completely normal, and, you know, wanting to get out and, you know, the desire to go live and be on your own is completely sane. And I guess maybe my parents feel that too. Like, my mom's mom is in Maine, you know, and my dad's parents is, I guess they're in North Carolina. No, half of them are. I don't know. We have a big family. Like, it's complicated. But, you know, I bet they kind of felt the same when they moved to, you know, North Carolina, is that, like, okay, like, we got to find time to go up there, and we got to find time to visit everybody. You know, it's going to be, you know, a lot of time. It's going to be, you know, a lot of moving pieces and schedules and fitting people in. And, like, now I'm starting to realize that I'm starting to get that point, because, like, when I go down for Christmas or something, it's always like, okay, I'm going to spend Christmas Day with my mom, and we're going to unwrap our presents, we're going to eat food, you know, and then I got to go to my dad's house Christmas Eve, and, you know, so it's just like there's a thing of visiting everybody, making sure you get everybody, you know, and there's that kind of stress as well when it comes to, like, when you move away, when you get out of that small town, you still have to go back, and you still have to visit everybody, you know. So it's quite interesting thinking about, you know, what life would be like if I stayed. I don't think that I would do very well if I stayed. I think that, you know, my mentality would break down. I think I would probably fall suit into the system. I think that I probably would end up with the wrong person yet again. And I don't think that I would have a good time doing it, any of it. You know, and there's definitely a lot of situations where I was so close to getting out, but I just kind of slipped back into the mentality of, like, this is where, you know, I was put. This is where I was raised. This is what I should be knowing. This is what I should be doing, right? Like, there's so many times where I said that to myself of, like, you know, like, this is what I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where I'm at right now. You know, I have to deal with what's in front of me until an opportunity presents itself, right? But I feel like an opportunity won't come unless you make it come. Like, I feel like waiting for the Calvary is never the right decision, because the Calvary will never come, because you yourself are the Calvary that's going to make the difference. And once I realized that, once I knew that, you know, it was just the action of doing it, which is honestly even scarier than thinking about it for so long, is the action of actually getting out there and doing it. And I'll tell you what, the first time I packed up my car and I started driving, I was scared shitless. I really was. I was like, oh my God, is this even the right thing that I'm doing right now? Is this, you know, is what I'm doing for me, or is it for somebody else? Like, what, you know, what does it all even mean? Like, I was so lost. I was like, I hope that, you know, I made the right decision. I hope that, you know, all of this plays out in the end for the good. And it did. You know, I feel like any kind of decision that you make, it always plays out in the end. I feel like it always will be okay, no matter what. And so when you're deciding to leave your hometown and deciding to leave your family in it and deciding to leave everything you know and love, you have to know in your heart that this is going to be the best thing that you ever did for yourself, for your, you know, mindset, for your your brain, your actions, your thoughts, everything. You know, this is going to be the start of something new. It's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging and difficult, but it's going to be the best time, because I did it and it was the best time. And, you know, figuring it out, I honestly think my most favorite part of it was figuring it out. And yeah, it was stressful. It was so stressful. You know, there was points where I hated my job in California, and I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? You know, and so it was very stressful trying to figure that out. But in the same time, like, I had an issue, I had a challenge in front of me, like, that was gripping for my brain, right? My ADHD brain was like, yes, here we go, what are we gonna do, Lauren? Let's figure it out. Like, you know, and a lot of people don't work like that, right? A lot of people shy away from opportunities like that, and they shy away from new challenges and new experiences and new mindsets. You know, a lot of people are closed-minded, and that's something that I never really liked about North Carolina, is that, like, a lot of people there are very closed-minded. Even if they see change happen right in front of their eyes, they're still closed-minded about things. And I think that's kind of why I also love the idea of travel, is that, like, it opened myself up to new ideas, to new environments, right? Things that I wasn't brought up thinking, right? Things that challenged me, challenged my beliefs, challenging everything that I know. Having a certain type of awareness is so beneficial, so refreshing, that I feel like I want to do it again. Right? I want to go move across the country again. I want to go, you know, travel to a different country, to somewhere that is not so touristy. Like, these are, like, my goals. It's not to get a new job. It's not to find some type of home that I feel so, like, homey in. You know, I never really feel at home. I guess that's also another thing that kind of doesn't sit right with me. I mean, obviously I feel at home in my apartment, right? Because my stuff is here. And my stuff, I know that is safe, right? And yeah, my partner is my home, right? She's a homey person, and, you know, I feel at home when she's with me, right? But, like, I don't know. I also view it as, like, this is just a place. This apartment can be taken from me very easily. These possessions that I have can be taken from me as well. And then what do I have at the end? What do I end up with? And it's just like, you know, I in that sense, like, I don't have a home. You know, I don't have that feeling that I used to, like, back in North Carolina. Like, that was my home, right? That's how it was. It was both my parents together and my brother and this house, right? That was my home. That's my idea of home, right? And then going out and having all these experiences is just like, well, I kind of feel at home everywhere, you know? When I was traveling, doing the road trip, right? I felt at home in Utah. I felt at home, you know, in South Dakota when we were doing all this adventurous stuff, you know. I felt at home when we were in national parks in Yosemite. I felt so at home there. Oh my God, I can't wait to go back. But, like, all these places, I just felt at home. Or even I didn't feel at home because it wasn't mine, you know. And so maybe I'll never be able to feel that kind of home vibe again. But maybe I don't really want to, I guess. I feel like I just don't live anywhere. Like, I just want to experience everything. And you know, a home is only what you say is a home. And so I kind of feel like everywhere is home for me, or nowhere is home for me, you know, because I'm just here. I feel like put on this earth to capture the experiences that I have and capture the beauty of this earth through my eyes. That's kind of why I feel like I'm here. And so I'm not really home here. My life can go by so quickly. I mean, you see that in your grandparents, you see that in your parents. Like, life goes by so fast. Like, there's not going to be a home anywhere, because at the end of the day, you're going to be gone. So I don't know, having this kind of mindset is kind of freeing, honestly, knowing that, you know, I could just book a flight and go and not be homesick is kind of invigorating, right? And that's kind of the mentality that I moved out with, is that like nowhere is home anymore. And maybe that's the best part. Everything can be taken from you, even yourself. If I was back in my hometown, I don't think I would ever have thought that I would be living here where I am now, or having this kind of mindset and saying this kind of stuff to you guys. Like, I never would have thought that I would have had this kind of mentality, you know. I never thought that I would care so much, but also care so little. This wasn't really a scripted podcast, clearly. I kind of went all over the place. Welcome to my ADHD brain. But I kind of wanted to talk about this subject because I feel like there's like a whole vibe around moving out of your small town, right? Moving away from your parents. There's just this whole thing that I felt that's just like, this is wrong. You know, you shouldn't be moving away from your parents. You shouldn't be moving out of your small town, right? Because what happens if you're lost, or you offend people, or you end up in prison? You know, I had all these what ifs. And I had all these ideas around leaving my small town, but, you know, as soon as I took the step to do it, I was so much better. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that kind of concept. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, share it, subscribe, do all those fun things. And I'll see you guys in the next video. It probably will be structured next video. And I hope that kind of made sense. If it did, like, put a comment down below if you've done it or you're thinking about doing it. I would love to know. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out, enjoy life, and live it up. Bye.